Hello, my name is Heather Resendez, and I'm here to talk about the Revolutionary Era. The Revolutionary Era actually began prior to the first shot being fired at Lexington and Concord to start the American Revolutionary War. According to Alan Brinkley, as early as 1956, during the Seven-Year War, tensions were beginning to heighten between America and Britain, in part due to the practice of British impressment of American soldiers to fight in British troops. After that war ended, England began to sense that they were losing control over the colonies, and they began to pass laws and legislation along with taxes in order to exercise that control again. With the proclamation of 1763, they basically prohibited colonists from expanding westward into Indian territories. They followed that with the Currency and Sugar Act of 1964, and more famously with the Mutiny and Stamp Acts of 1965. Groups of resistance begin to form against these laws and acts. One of the most famous is the Sons of Liberty, who in 1965 rioted in Boston up and down the coast in response to the Stamp Act. Here in North Carolina, the Regulator Movement in 1771 was a riot in opposition of taxes. The Daughters of Liberty were against the Tea Act of 1773, and this ultimately led to the Boston Tea Party, where chests of tea were thrown into the Boston Harbor. After the war began, Americans were taxed with the burden of trying to create a government that was going to stand the test of time. They were led in the Continental Congress by John and Sam Adams on the side of complete independence, and then other statesmen were advocating for modest reforms and some for reconciliation with Great Britain. Alfred Young, in his article, The Pressure of the People on the Framers of the Constitution, spoke of the people out of doors, or the common masses that wanted a voice in this new government. They did not want to be controlled by an elite group of congressmen as they were by the British. This led to several compromises being made, including the ability to change the Constitution or add amendments. After the war was ended, October the 19th, 1781, at Yorktown, several civil rights movements began to emerge. One of these were from slaves and black people who had been exposed to the idea of liberty during the war, would the British offer them freedom in exchange for their service in the army, and they began to fight for their freedoms as well. The Native Americans were weakened by the Revolutionary War. Brinkley states that the triumph of the American patriots in the Revolutionary War contributed to the ultimate defeat of the Indian tribes. Americans were mad at the Indians for supporting Britain, and we also wanted to expand into their lands. Women also took up civil rights movements as they had contributed to the war efforts. They had heard Thomas Jefferson say, all men are created equal in the Declaration of Independence, and famously, Abigail Adams, in her letter to John Adams in 1776, said, remember the ladies and be more generous and favorable to them than your ancestors. She basically threatened, we will not hold ourselves bound by any laws in which we have no voice or representation. And all of that Revolutionary era has led us to where we are today, with all groups and minorities experiencing the right to experience life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, and the belief that all men are created equal. Thank you, and I have abided by the Winston-Salem State University integrity policy on this assignment.